Hello and welcome. During this video, we're going to talk about mobile intake within CenterPiece. Mobile intake will allow your clients to check in for their appointments at your center by completing digital intake and consent forms, either before their visit or when they arrive at your center. Using this mobile intake feature will help your center achieve your paperless goals. From the CenterPiece scheduler, you can queue up customized digital intake and consent forms for your clients, much like you prepare a clipboard with paper forms for clients before their arrival. Having the client complete the forms digitally speeds up the intake process, reduces the need for data entry, and reduces data entry errors. And best of all, mobile intake is completely secure and HIPAA compliant. The process is very simple. First, you will create a form request in the scheduler. You can think of a form request like a digital clipboard that has your client's name along with all of the intake and consent forms they need to fill out before their visit. Next, your client will securely complete the digital forms in one of three ways. One, they can be completed prior to their visit by sending an encrypted link to the forms via an SMS text message. Two, they can be completed at your office on your client's own device by scanning a QR code. And three, they can be completed at your office using a center-furnished tablet. Once completed, the forms are returned to you where they can be reviewed, processed, and added directly to the client file, all without any additional data entry and without the use of paper. So let's go ahead and go to the CenterPiece scheduler and take a look at this first step of creating a form request. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this task pane right here so that we have a little bit more viewable space. Now remember from the introduction that a form request is synonymous to preparing the clipboard with all of the intake and consent forms that the client is handed when they arrive at your center based on the specific services they are receiving. With a form request, however, instead of gathering the paper forms, we are simply gathering the digital forms and queuing them up for the client. So let's walk through an example of creating a form request by creating one for this client right here who is scheduled for a pregnancy test. To create the form request, all I need to do is click here on the ellipsis under the mobile forms column. I'm going to select that I want to send this client the contact information form, the case intake form, and the pregnancy test form. I'll also ask that she reads and digitally signs the request for services form. Next, I'll click Save and Close, and that's it. Our form request has been completed and is queued for the client. Next, let's talk about the second step of how the client receives and completes the forms using CenterPiece's mobile intake application. Now I'm going to show you all three ways, but let's first take a look at sending the client an SMS text message with a secure link to the forms so they can be completed before the client arrives at your center. Now to do that, let's take a second example and send the forms via SMS to this client right here who's also scheduled for a pregnancy test. Now I'm actually going to walk through the process of creating a form request again, even though I just showed you that, because when you send a form request via an SMS text message, you actually don't need to queue the form request like we did last time. You can create the form request and then immediately send it to the client. So let's go ahead and walk through this real quick. Once more, I'm going to click on the ellipsis right here under the mobile forms column. Again, I'm going to send the client contact information form, the case intake form, the pregnancy test form, and I'm also going to ask that this client reads and digitally signs the request for services form. Now instead of clicking Save and Close like we did last time to queue the forms, this time I'm going to click Save. And once I click Save, notice how these tabs right here are now available. So I'm going to click on the Send Form tab. And in order to send the forms via an SMS text message, all I need to do is select my SMS template and then I'll click Send Form Request. You can see that the form request was created and sent to my client all in one easy step. I'm going to close this and you can see the status has been updated to Sent. Okay, so just to differentiate, when you send the form request via an SMS text, you don't need to create the form request and then queue it like we did last time. Instead, you can create it and then immediately send it to your client. And it's really that easy. Okay, so we are going to take a look at that text message that was sent, and I'm going to walk you through all of the digital forms in just a second. But I first want to go back to the queued form request that we created earlier and show you those other two ways that the client can receive and complete the forms. Now remember from the introduction that the second way the client can receive and complete the forms is for the receptionist at your center to scan a QR code using the camera on the client's phone to launch the mobile app. So let's walk through that example, and let's say that this client, Ann Llewellyn, who we've already queued the form request for, has arrived at our center for her appointment. As the receptionist, the first thing I'll do is click here on the mobile intake button that's conveniently located right here in the scheduler. Clicking on this will take me to the mobile intake inbox where I can manage all of my form requests. I'll locate the queued form request for Ann Llewellyn. I'm going to click to expand the row details, and next I would ask Ann for her phone with the camera open. I'd simply point the camera at this QR code and then click on the link. So let's actually do that. I'm going to go ahead and share out my phone to the screen. I'll point the camera to this QR code and a link pops up. I'll click on the link and the mobile intake app launches. At this point, I could hand the phone back to Ann and she would be able to validate her identity by answering these two questions, and then she would begin filling out the forms. Now, using the QR code is also great for walk-in clients or for someone who schedules a same-day ultrasound. You can quickly queue up the forms for the client and then scan the QR code and they can digitally fill out the forms while they're waiting. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about that third way that the client can receive and complete the forms, and that is for the receptionist to launch the mobile intake app on a center-owned tablet and then enter in this unique 7-digit code right here. Now, you might do this in a scenario where your client doesn't have a mobile device, or if you just prefer for your clients to use a center-owned tablet. Okay, so I'm going to once again share out my device to the screen, and from here, as the receptionist, I would just enter in that 7-digit code, and then I would simply hand the tablet back to the client, where again they would validate their identity with these two questions, and then start walking through the digital forms in the waiting room. Okay, so just to review, if you want your clients to receive and complete the digital paperwork before they arrive at your center, you will complete the form request and then immediately send it from the scheduler via SMS text message like we did for our client Lauren Smith. If, however, you prefer for them to fill out the digital paperwork once they arrive, or if you have a walk-in client or something like that, then you will create and queue the form request, and from there you can have the client complete the forms on their own device using the QR code, or complete the forms on a center furnished device by launching the mobile app and entering in that 7-digit code. Okay, so now let's go back to that first form request that we created and sent via SMS text message. And let's take a look at the text message that was sent. I'll again share out my phone, and this is the text message that was sent. Okay, so let's go ahead and walk through this. I'm going to click on the link and the mobile intake app will launch, and the client is asked to verify their identity by entering in their birth date and last name. So we actually require 2 additional forms of validation besides their phone number. Okay, so I'm going to quickly enter in the client's birth date and then the last name. And after verifying, you can see all 4 forms that we sent. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this first one, the contact information form. Now, for time purposes, I'm not going to walk through all of the information on all of these forms, but I do want to enter in a few fields so you can see how easy it is and you can see how it's added to the client file. So let's go ahead and enter in an address right here. And then we'll do a city, state, and a zip. And then I'm going to go ahead and answer a few of these questions. And notice that this form is built for touch. So for instance, here on the language spoken field, I'll click English. And if I want to deselect it, I'll just click again and it's deselected. Okay, I'll click it again. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Next, and you can see there is now a green check mark next to the contact information showing me that this form is completed, and I have an arrow showing me that the next form I need to fill out is the case intake information form. I'll click right here and begin answering a few questions on this form. Now as I scroll down and answer these questions, notice the different sections. When you watch the next couple videos, they are going to walk you through setting up your digital forms, and you'll learn that you can customize all of these different forms. So, for example, you might want to create a specific case form for your mail clients where you leave off this partner information section because it doesn't really pertain to males. So, when queuing up your forms, you can select to send the female version of the form or the male version, depending on your client. So I'm going to scroll to the bottom and answer this last question here. And in addition to being able to hide questions, you can also make certain questions required. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next, and you can see that I get a friendly error message here asking me to please scroll up and answer the required fields. I'm going to scroll up here, and you can see that the income field is required. I'll answer that and then scroll back down and click Next. Okay, now the next form I need to fill out is the pregnancy test form. I'll click to open it, and the first thing I have here is the LMP. So I'll go ahead and enter in an LMP right here, and then I'll answer a few more of these questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Okay, so we've now completed all of the intake forms, and the last thing we have here are the consent forms. So I'll click here, and you can see that we only have one consent form, the request for services form. I'll click to open it and scroll down a bit here, and you can see that the client is asked to read the form and then click I accept. Then when they type in their full name right here, the client will then click that they understand that by entering in their full name and clicking continue, they are electronically signing this document. So let's do that, and then with the form complete, I'll click Next. Okay, so you can see that we have all of our forms completed, and the next step is just to click Submit, and we're given a message that we have checked in online. Okay, so at this point in the process, we've completed our form request, we've sent it to the client, and the forms have been completed and returned to us. So the next step is to process the completed forms in CenterPiece. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to CenterPiece to the mobile intake inbox, and I'll expand the row details right here, and notice that the status has changed to return, and you can see the 4 forms that were sent back. Now the first step here is to either start a new case or select an open case to apply these forms to. The indicator to know whether you need to create a new case is whether you send the case intake form. So since we did send her a case intake form, I know that I need to go ahead and start a new case. Now if there wasn't a case intake form, I would know that these are supplemental forms that are supporting a current open case. So I could use this drop down right here to select the most current open case and then apply these forms to that case. Okay, but since I'm starting a new case, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this green Start Intake button. The quick form is launched, and notice that all of the contact information we entered into the digital forms is filled out right here. I can quickly review the information, then I'm going to scroll down to the case intake form, and again you can see all of the information that we entered right here. I'll keep scrolling down and notice this office use only section. Now these questions were hidden from the client, but they're visible to you when you're processing the form. So I'm going to quickly fill out her abortion vulnerability right here, and notice we also have the spiritual assessment and commitment to abstinence, all of that right here. Okay, next I'm going to scroll down and I have the case visit form. I'm going to select that the primary purpose of the visit is for a pregnancy test. I'll keep scrolling down and we have the pregnancy test right here. You can see the LMP that we entered, and once again we have these office use only questions that are available for the office staff but hidden from the client. Okay, I'm going to keep scrolling down and you can see the request for services form right here. I'll click to expand the row details, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit and it's right here, and you can see that it's been digitally signed. Okay, so at this point I can add any other forms that I want to, or I can just click Save and Open. So I'll do that, and the forms are saved and were taken into her client file. So let's go ahead and review her file. Notice the contact information right here and the new case with the assessment information that we entered right here. I'm going to click on the Activity tab, and you can see the case visit and the pregnancy test form. Okay, next I want to click on the Documents tab so you can see the signed request for services right here. I'm going to click here to download it, and then I'll open it, and Scroll down and you can see that that's been signed and it's stored under her Documents tab. Okay, well, that's about it for the overview of mobile intake. As you can see, this new feature will allow you to achieve your paperless goals, speed up your client intake time, and dramatically decrease the amount of data entry that your staff has to complete. To get started using this feature, your next step is to watch the rest of the mobile intake videos. These videos will walk you through all of the next steps. In addition to the videos, you can also click on the Help tab and view the mobile intake documentation under the Office Management section. And as always, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any other questions. Thanks so much for your time.